This story follows Marcus Tate, a man wrongfully imprisoned, who finds purpose in protecting a vulnerable young inmate, Eddie. It begins with a vivid hook, drawing readers into the harsh world of the cell block. The themes of kindness, selflessness, and justice are woven through Marcus's journey, as he risks his safety and potential freedom to stand up for Eddie. Unexpected turns, like the lawyer's letter and the violent attack on Eddie, keep the narrative engaging, while the emotional climax, Marcus rallying others to confront Big Ray, shows the transformative power of compassion. The story concludes with Marcus's freedom and a heartwarming message about the enduring strength of humanity, designed to inspire and uplift readers. Please respect your parents now, though. Let's start video. The cell block was a symphony of echoes, clanging bars, distant shouts, and the low hum of despair that clung to the air like damp rot. Marcus Tate sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the chipped concrete wall where someone had scratched "Freedom is a state of mind." He snorted softly. Freedom felt like a cruel joke in here, where time crawled and hope was a contraband nobody could smuggle. At 32, Marcus was serving year 3 of a 7-year sentence for a robbery he swore he didn't commit. The truth didn't matter much in the county lockup. It was a place where stories got buried under the weight of steel doors and broken dreams. Yet, in this great purgatory, something extraordinary was about to unfold, a spark of humanity that would light up the darkest corners of his world. Marcus wasn't always the quiet man he'd become. Back in his old life, he was a mechanic with a quick laugh and a knack for fixing anything with an engine. He'd grown up in a small Ohio town, raised by a grandmother who taught him to lend a hand before asking for one. But a single night, a wrong place, wrong time moment, had landed him here, branded a felon. The other inmates called him Tinker, because he'd rigged a broken radio in the rec room to pick up jazz stations. It was a small act, but it earned him a sliver of respect in a place where respect was currency. Still, Marcus kept to himself, wary of the alliances and grudges that ruled the block. Across the hall, in cell 214, was Eddie Cruz, a wiry 19-year-old with a shaved head and eyes that darted like a cornered animal's. Eddie was new, barely a month into a 2-year stint for petty theft. He'd stolen a car to pay for his sister's hospital bills, or so he claimed. The other inmates didn't care about his reasons, they saw fresh meat. Eddie's first week had been brutal: taunts, shoves, a tray of food accidentally knocked from his hands. Marcus watched it all from a distance, his grandmother's voice echoing in his head, "Kindness don't cost you nothing, Marcus. But kindness in lockup could cost you everything: your pride, your safety, your sanity." One night the cell block went quiet, an unnatural stillness broken only by a muffled sob from Eddie's cell. Marcus lay on his bunk, trying to ignore it. He'd seen plenty of kids like Eddie break under the pressure. Most learned to toughen up or got crushed. But the sobbing didn't stop. It was raw, jagged, the sound of someone unraveling. Marcus sat up, cursing under his breath. He didn't want to care. Caring was dangerous. Yet something pulled him to his feet, and he pressed his face to the bars, squinting across the dim hall. "Kid," he whispered, loud enough to carry but soft enough not to draw the guards. "You okay?" The sobbing hitched, then stopped. Eddie's voice came back, small and shaky. "I ain't cut out for this, man. They're gonna kill me." Marcus didn't ask who they were. He knew. The block had its predators, guys like Big Ray, who ran the yard with a smirk and a shank hidden in his shoe. Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just keep your head down, Eddie. Don't give him a reason." But the next day, Eddie gave them a reason. In the cafeteria, he bumped into Big Ray's tray, spilling gravy across the table. The room went still, every eye on the kid who'd just signed his own death warrant. Big Ray stood, towering over Eddie, his voice low and venomous. "You got a problem, boy?" Eddie froze, his tray trembling in his hands. Marcus, sitting 3 tables away, felt his stomach knot. He could look away, let the kid learn the hard way. But then he saw Eddie's eyes, wide, desperate, the same eyes he'd seen in the mirror his first month inside. Before he could think, Marcus was on his feet, crossing the cafeteria. "Ray, it was an accident," he said, voice steady but firm. Kids knew. Let it go. The room held its breath. Big Ray turned, his smirk fading into something colder. You vouchin' for him, Tinker? That's a big risk for a nobody. Marcus didn't flinch. Yeah, I'm vouchin'. He didn't know why he said it. Maybe it was his grandmother's voice again, or maybe it was the memory of the man he used to be. Whatever it was, there was no going back now. Big Ray laughed, a sound like gravel underfoot. All right, Tinker. He's your problem now. He shoved Eddie's tray to the floor and walked away, but Marcus knew this wasn't over. In lockup, nothing was ever over. That night, Eddie whispered through the bars again. Why'd you do that, man? You don't even know me. Marcus lay back, staring at the ceiling. Didn't do it for you, kid. Did it for me. It wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough. He didn't want to admit he'd seen something in Eddie, a spark of the boy he'd been before life had chewed him up. Over the next few weeks, Marcus kept an eye on Eddie. It wasn't easy. Big Ray's crew tested the kid at every turn, tripping him in the yard, stealing his commissary snacks. Marcus stepped in when he could, teaching Eddie how to move through the block without drawing attention. He showed him how to barter for small favors, how to spot trouble before it found you. In return, Eddie started opening up. He talked about his sister, Lila, who was 12 and fighting leukemia. He talked about the car he'd stolen, how he'd planned to sell it to cover her chemo. I was gonna pay it back, Eddie said, eyes glistening. I swear. Marcus listened, nodding. He didn't judge. He'd learned long ago that the line between right and wrong got blurry when you were desperate. But what struck him was Eddie's guilt, not for the theft, but for leaving Lila alone. She thinks I'm a hero, Eddie said one night, his voice breaking. What kind of hero gets locked up? The question hit Marcus harder than he expected. He'd asked himself the same thing 1,000 times. What kind of man was he if he couldn't clear his name, couldn't get back to the life he'd lost? But Eddie's words stirred something deeper, a memory of his grandmother handing out sandwiches to the homeless every Sunday, saying, You don't gotta be perfect to do good. Maybe she was right. Maybe goodness wasn't about being a hero. Maybe it was about showing up, even when you were broken. Then came the day everything changed. It started like any other, gray, monotonous, the air thick with tension. Marcus was in the rec room, tinkering with a flickering light fixture the guards had ignored for weeks. Eddie was there too, reading a tattered library book. That's when Big Ray and his crew walked in. Marcus felt the shift immediately, the way the room seemed to shrink. Ray didn't say a word, just nodded to one of his guys, who grabbed Eddie's book and tore it in half. Eddie stood, fists clenched, but Marcus shot him a look, don't. Eddie sat back down, but his eyes were burning. Ray leaned in close, whispering something Marcus couldn't hear. Whatever it was, it made Eddie flinch. Marcus stepped forward, ready to intervene, but before he could, a guard's voice crackled over the intercom. Tate, report to the warden's office. Now. The walk to the warden's office felt like a march to judgment. Warden Hayes was a no-nonsense woman with steel-gray hair and a reputation for fairness, but Marcus didn't trust anyone in a suit. She gestured to a chair. Sit, Tate. Got something for you. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a letter from a pro bono lawyer named Claire Nguyen. Marcus's heart skipped. He'd written to every legal aid group he could find, begging for someone to look at his case. Most never responded. But Clara had. She'd reviewed his file, found inconsistencies in the eyewitness testimony, and was petitioning for a new hearing. You might be out in 6 months, Hayes said, her voice softer than usual. If it pans out. Marcus stared at the letter, his hands shaking. Freedom. The word felt foreign, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. He wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream. But all he could manage was a nod. Thank you, ma'am. Back in the block, he didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Hope was fragile, and he wasn't ready to test it. But when he saw Eddie that evening, hunched over in his cell, something shifted. The kid looked smaller, like the fight was draining out of him. Marcus knocked on the bars. What did Ray say to you? Eddie didn't look up. Said he knows where my sister lives. Said if I don't do what he wants, she's gonna pay. Marcus felt a chill. Threats like that weren't empty in here. Big Ray had connections outside, guys who'd do anything for a price. Marcus's first instinct was to protect himself, keep his head down, focus on his own shot at freedom. But then he saw Eddie's hands, trembling as they clutched a photo of Lila, a gap-toothed girl with braids and a smile that didn't belong in a place like this. That night Marcus couldn't sleep. He thought about his grandmother, about the stories she told him of people who stood up when it mattered most. He thought about the man he wanted to be, not the one the system had labeled him. By morning, he made a decision, one that scared him more than anything he'd faced in here. He found Big Ray in the yard, leaning against the fence like a king holding court. Marcus walked up, heart pounding, and said, "Leave the kid alone, Ray. Whatever you want, take it up with me." Ray's eyes narrowed. "You sure about this, Tinker? You're playing a dangerous game." "I'm sure," Marcus said, and for the first time in years he felt the weight of his own words. He wasn't just vouching for Eddie anymore, he was staking his own survival on it. The next few days were a blur of tension. Ray's crew didn't touch Eddie, but they didn't let Marcus off easy. His bunk was trashed, his commissary stolen. One night someone slipped a note under his pillow, "Back off or bleed." Marcus didn't back off. He started teaching Eddie how to fight, not with fists, but with words, with strategy. He told him about Clara, about the chance at a new hearing. "You gotta hold on, kid," Marcus said. "For Lila. For you." Then came the moment that broke the dam. It was a Thursday, just after lights out, when a scream tore through the block. Marcus bolted upright, recognizing Eddie's voice. He pressed against the bars, shouting for the guards, but none came. Across the hall, he saw shadows moving in Eddie's cell, two figures, one holding the kid down. Marcus banged on the bars, yelling until his throat burned. Finally, a guard appeared, lazy and annoyed, but he opened Eddie's cell. The attackers scattered, and Eddie was left curled up on the floor, blood trickling from his lip. Marcus didn't think. He didn't plan. When the guards opened his cell for morning count, he marched straight to the rec room, where Ray was holding court. The room went quiet as Marcus stood in front of him, fists clenched. "You crossed the line," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You touch him again, you deal with me. And I ain't alone." He didn't know where the words came from, but they weren't empty. Other inmates, guys Marcus had helped, guys who'd heard the radio he'd fixed or eaten the extra bread he'd shared, stepped forward. Not many, but enough. A wiry old-timer named Pops, who'd been in for 20 years. A quiet guy named Javier, who owed Marcus for a letter he'd written to his daughter. Even the cook, who'd once thanked Marcus for fixing the kitchen's busted fan. They stood with him, a ragtag line of men who'd found something worth fighting for. Ray looked around, his smirk faltering. For the first time, he didn't have the upper hand. "You think this changes anything?" he spat, but he backed off, his crew following. Eddie was shaken but alive. The guards, sensing the shift, started watching Ray closer. Word spread through the block, about Marcus, about the stand he'd taken. Guys who'd never spoken to him nodded in respect. Eddie, his face bruised but his eyes clearer, whispered through the bars that night. "You didn't have to do that, man. You got your own shot at getting out." Marcus leaned back, the weight of the day settling into his bones. "Yeah, I did," he said. "Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to live with myself when I'm free." Months later, Marcus stood in a courtroom, Clara and Gwyn by his side. The judge granted his new hearing, and the truth, finally, came to light. A witness recanted, evidence was re-examined, and Marcus walked out a free man. But before he left, he made one last stop at the county lockup. Eddie was there, waiting in the visitation room, a shy smile on his face. "Lila got your letter," he said. "She's in remission. And she says you're her hero too." Marcus laughed, blinking back tears. "Tell her we're all heroes, kid." Just takes the right moment to show it. As he stepped into the sunlight, free for the first time in years, Marcus felt his grandmother's presence, her voice whispering, "Kindness don't cost you nothing, but it gives you everything." In that gray hell of lockup, he'd found something stronger than steel bars: humanity, fragile but unbreakable, shining through the cracks of a broken system. And that, he knew, was a story worth telling.